You're all good. You're all good. How are you keeping well?
I'm extremely well, thank you. Yes, and yourself?
I am. I'm in Stockholm. The sun is shining. The skies are blue, and I've had probably one of the best years of my life so far.
Oh, wow. Wow. And you measure that by what?
Happiness, output, creativity, joy, life goals. So much. Like, it's been 2020 has been so good to me. And it's probably no coincidence because I have a life path number in numerology of 22. I have a master number. And I already felt that a lot of things in my life were getting flushed out in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a sense that as I entered into the new year, a lot of really positive things were going to happen for me this year. And we're now, what are we, we're in our 6th month. And it's just been fantastic, Stewart.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
I'm so blessed. I started the year off in the Seychelles, flew back to Sweden. I've only left the country once, which was to go to Riga for a weekend. And I have been in Stockholm almost all of the time, working, enjoying life. And tomorrow I get the keys for my new summer cottage in the middle of Sweden. And I've got my own island. I have my own forest and woodland. My island is actually vagina-shaped, which is beautiful because I'm buying it from 2 lesbian ladies from Stockholm. And they never even realized the shape of this island. And I told them, and I says, I want a feminine island where I could actually go off and meditate and put up a nice little, maybe even do retreats with people like yourself. And so tomorrow we get the keys for that. So it's very exciting.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yes, brother. So tell me, how are you?
I'm exceedingly well. I'm very busy during this time. It's been a wonderful year for me as well as a result of the great gift of a new book that I published called Diana, the Voice of Change, and all the varying possibilities that will arise out of the way that the book has been received, which is it's become an international bestseller. And so I'm very thrilled by that as I begin to plan the next stage of the project that arises from the book, which will be called the Diana Heart Path.
Wow. So just, can we jump back a bit? Because one of the most, your life, you've had an amazing life generally. You were actually, so just what I remember, when I tell people about you, I say, Stewart Pearce is indirectly responsible for helping London win the Olympics in 2012. Because he was the voice coach for Seb Coe, David Beckham, and many others. And as we know, light informs, but sound transforms. So Stewart Pearce is the guy that can transform your life by showing you how to speak from your heart. Every time before I do anything important, I go to a Stewart Pearce audio, and I do it. So if you haven't got Stewart Pearce's books and Stewart Pearce's audios, and you're looking to become the best version of yourself, you need to get them. But the strange thing about your life is you didn't speak at all, I think, for the first 7 years. And you were growing up in Buckingham Palace, which made it even more amazing. Am I right?
My parents, my father worked for the British Royal Family. For the first 7 years, we weren't literally in Buckingham Palace. We were in St. James's Palace, which is just close by. And there was a period in the first decade, I think it was probably around 7, 8, 9, where I did not speak for 2 years.
Wow.
And the reason why that was so is because I was talking about what I was seeing in the sense of seeing the multidimensional universe. And I thought everybody, in my innocence, I thought everybody saw what I was seeing. And then I discovered that they didn't, because I was met by a gross amount of disapprobation, disapproval. So I just decided to shut up for 2 years. And my brother spoke for me, which was an amazing time, actually, an amazing time of observation. Taught me a great deal about stillness, even though I was a very small child.
Yeah. And as a result of that, you actually became obviously you became closer to the royals. You would see the Queen regularly as a child, and I remember you told me about you playing with a paper airplane with her and things like that.
Oh yes,
and of course that led you on to the beautiful Diana, who you've now written a book about. So can you give us a bit of what why this book? Why now?
I realized that the vessel that Diana was, and the 2 years worth of work that I moved through with Diana, was an extraordinary record, and therefore a contemporary vessel that all women could use to empower themselves, to literally become the voice of change that Diana was. And as soon as I started thinking in these terms, 22, well, actually, I suppose it was 20 years, say 19 years, because I started writing it probably about 3 years ago, which is 22 years after her death. I felt very, very closely in contact with Diana. And as a result, I felt that the book literally wrote itself from the perspective of where she is now, and that she may have passed in 1997, but that she actually is an angel of vast luminosity who is wanting, from whichever spiritual dimension she happens to exist in, was wanting to help women as much as possible through all of the varying vicissitudes that maybe the women of the world are choosing to bring about a sense of their own sovereignty, their own empowerment, and using Diana as a vessel or as a model, a point of influence, a point of inspiration, as a result of the work that I did with her. And so, I mean, I'm trying to encapsulate the book into a very simple sentence, or a few sentences. Principally what the Diana, the Voice of Change, does is to throw new light on what we saw as being one of the most famous women of her time, as well as drawing each reader towards a sense of their own dazzling transformation by finding their own authentic signature note and by illuminating their soul's radiance.
Wow.
So effectively, that's what the book is all about, and sharing the key principles that Diana engaged in, which enabled her to move from the victim consciousness that she felt herself held by, because she found herself in a relationship that was very challenging for her, in the sense of the fact that although she loved her husband, it was obvious that he was in love with somebody else. And so, that's obviously a very, very tricky situation for any person to go through, any lady to go through, and particularly as Diana was very young.
Yeah. How young was she when she met Charles?
She was 18, 19.
Wow.
Mm.
And that obviously threw her straight into the spotlight automatically, just by being even associated with the future King of England.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And so then when they married, she was 20. And as we saw, she was a very young 20-year-old. Not too dissimilar to her own mother, who got married when she was 18.
Yeah, but she was a late bloomer. Like, I'm a late bloomer myself, and I know that when I look at what some of these 16, 17, 18-year-old kids can do on TikTok and social media, and I'm amazed by how advanced they are for their age. Like, I didn't go backpacking until I was 28, and by that stage I was just sort of relentlessly doing qualifications within finance, and I blossomed later. But she's like that as well. And do you have any sort of relationship with her sons, or do you know what they take after their mother, or?
I don't have a close relationship with them. No, I don't. I mean, obviously we're aware of one another, because I was aware of them when they were children. Do they take after their mother? Well, I feel this gives me a perfect opportunity to say, I feel that we need to cease comparisons.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously a tremendous love, fondness, and recollection of who Diana was in their hearts. Are they very much her sons? Yes. I mean, their love, I think, is pretty palpably obvious to see. and their charm, their easiness, their authenticity, their earthedness brings them to very, very easy connection with all of the opportunities that they have to shine in the way that they do, whether it be through their creative endeavors or as we see them moving generally in the world with their beautiful wives.
Yeah.
So they're two very remarkable young men. And I feel that we will see a tremendous amount of them as they develop, as they grow. I mean, they're both in their 30s at this time. And although it's been very unsettling recently for Harry and Meghan, they, I believe, are now feeling themselves to be very happy and easy in their new life in the United States of America.
Yeah. And I know that you have been increasingly working in America. What is over the past, because when I met you, it was in Dublin, and I've met you since in London, and we have been in Egypt at the same time, but you were on retreat and I was on holiday, I think last year. And I know you're increasingly working in America. And what do you feel is the energy in that country at the moment?
Well, right at this very moment.
No, like over the past few years, or how does it differ from Europe?
Well, the industry that I'm working in mostly in the United States of America is the mind, body, spirit industry. And when I started writing books at the beginning of this century, I discovered that I had a huge readership in the United States of America. I had more readership in the States than I did in Europe. And so I gained opportunities to go around 2009, 2010, to go very specifically into the mind-body industry in the United States of America. And I must admit that I've made some very, very good friends. I've had an extraordinary time. I've met some wonderful audiences who really appreciate what my work is all about. And so I have a very harmonious relationship with what takes place within that particular industry. Now, having said that, I also work in other industries because I work as a coach within the corporate world. I still train leading actors, but less so within the entertainment industry. That was something that I almost closed a door on 10 years ago when I resigned from my position at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre as Master of Voice. So, what's shocking at this time is that we look into the United States and we see it going through a very, very painful death and a very painful birth of a completely new order of being. In order to achieve that order, obviously, the darkness has come up, the shadow has come up, and that needs to be healed or extirpated. And then I'm sure that a very intelligent group of people will step forward as neo-paradigm enlightened leaders to lead the country forward in the way that it best needs to become the element of the golden age that we've dreamed of for so many years beginning to happen. So, that's at the moment what I think about as far as North America is concerned, or the United States is concerned. It's obviously very shocking to me that we needed to experience the death of George Floyd and all the ensuing crises that has taken place. And I hope very quickly that they resolve the anger that seems to have brewed as a result of this trigger mechanism of George's death and a number of other features against the backdrop, of course, of COVID and the potential economic recession that the country and the world will possibly move into. So it's in an extraordinary state of flux at the moment, but still I love the vastness of the United States of America. Energetically, I feel very free there. I feel that my work is appreciated much more in the United States than perhaps in Europe. So all of these congruent intricacies come together in my consciousness, and I love the United States of America. So eventually I should possibly develop a home there.
Beautiful. I'm the same. When I talk about America, I see three different Americas. Number one is the land. The land has got everything from desert to swamp to beautiful beaches and vast forests and everything else. Then you have America, the people, and they are as varied and wonderful as anything you can meet anywhere else in the world, and very open and receptive to the new and very supportive. And then you have America, the politics, which is a swamp, but it's that's what's sold to the world as America, and a lot of people just see that and they think that what you see being tweeted out and what you see in the nightly news is America, but it's such a small reflection of the true beauty of what that great country is, and I love it, like yourself, and I'm the same as you. I sell a lot of books and a lot of content through America, and I don't even promote my stuff in America, but there's a great hunger, and there's a real desire to consume new, fresh ideas, and they really put their money where their mouth is as well and invest. So I really appreciate that nation. And another thing I wanted to ask you then was London. I see London as the centre of the world. You've lived in London basically all your life. What sort of transformation is happening within that sort of heart chakra city of our globe?
Well, at the moment, it's vast for the inevitable reasons. I've been in the city all the way through this lockdown, and I'm seeing the city in a completely different way from how it has been in prior years. The level of stillness, the level of peace has brought about a new form of behavior in the people. Wherever I move, I see people smiling and greeting one. So I feel that something very dynamic and very consequential on a very deep instinctual level is happening within the British people. The difficulty is that, of course, again, any of that change is thrown against the backdrop of three essential crises. Similarly, as with the United States, COVID, the economic shifting points, and also Brexit. And so I know that from a political point of view, there is a tremendous unrest in most British people about what can be referred to as a future of uncertainty. It gives me the opportunity of being able to encourage people into the wisdom of uncertainty. But that's a question of being able to re-educate on a fundamental value basis. So I feel that, for example, these three effects are really encouraging us to redefine what our values are and to create a new hierarchy of values. So I feel that that's really where the United Kingdom is at this time. It's in a state of chaos from a governing council point of view, as we see in the United States of America. But that's bound to be because of the nature of the fact that we're all unplugging from the old paradigm of patriarchal, institutional, governmental management. And what we're saying is that we want a new system of governing. And at the moment, that is being, as it were, created as we speak. I believe that this whole lockdown process has given us an opportunity to really think very deeply about not just what our own individual values are, but as citizens of any nation, of how we wish the nation and its leaders to behave so that we can move into a paradigm where, as I say in my book, the voice of change is the voice of love. So I feel that we need to move away from the over-identification with the cerebral and the intellectual into a much more heart-centered, soul-oriented, empathic, compassionate, co-creative form of energy.
Yes.
Now, these are very, very new energies for governing council who have been brought up or have experience through the corporate world or any other industry, ways of behaving, ways of thinking, ways of feeling that are not associated with what I've just shared. And I tend to, I'm a futurist and an optimist, so I tend to move with the flow of the greatest ease rather than being caught up in points of resistance. And I see that the death of the patriarchy in this great city, because it's such an old city, when we think about its influence on the world, not just through the British Empire, but also through colonialism and before, that we see this hugely powerful establishment, which is literally just steeped in tradition and heritage, that has extraordinary characteristics that are very positive, but at the same time is steeped in an intransigence and a level of permanency, which I personally feel is an illusion, that needs to be shifted so that the way that we live our lives are much more congruent with the way that we need to live our lives today. And the establishment doesn't want to change.
Of course, it wants to be self.
So it's a complex social phenomenon that could be talked about in so many different ways. But from what I'm seeing, it's at the moment not very attractive.
There's another belief that I have, and as we enter the age of Aquarius, I believe that the predominant energy of our world is moving east. And when I see the turbulence that is happening in the sort of mega cities of Europe and North America, and I see the harmony which is growing in the cities of in the cities of Asia, I have a real sense of end of glory days, at least. I was going to say end of days, but end of glory days for what Europe was and what it is becoming. Because when I spend time in great cities such as Buenos Aires and the capital of Cuba, Havana, and I see how grand and vast they were at one time and how they lost their energy, and the energy was moved to another location. And I've really been feeling that presence in Europe over the last 7 or 8 years. And what I sense is there's a quickeningness in the sort of end of glory days. And when I go to Asia, and the more time I spend in Asia, the more I sense they're coming into like a phoenix rising from the ashes. They're coming into full glory like a flower that's blooming. Do you have any sense around that energy, or am I, or what do you feel?
Well, it's interesting because this morning in a newsfeed article that I didn't have time to read very fully, there was a comment made that the president of China was a neo-paradigm leader because of a number of policies that he's recently inculcated in the broader dimension, the sort of macro system of the way that the Chinese government functions. Having worked in China, I don't necessarily see that the society at large is ready to become a global leader in relation to the neo-paradigm considerations that we would like to bring about to enhance cultural change, because I feel that there's still so much societal conflict within China, wounds that arise from the time of the Cultural Revolution that still need to be healed in the peoples. So I don't necessarily see how they will become a cultural influencer. What I do see is that they have a steadfastness and a determination to be commercially immensely successful, particularly in relation to information technology and AI. Now, of course, they're two very leading potentials within our world. And so as a result of commercialist success, maybe some of the other more sociological tendencies will mature and become richer.
Yes.
To enable the nation. But I mean, I don't think that's tomorrow. I feel that takes many, many, many years to bring about.
Absolutely. But I sense that as a nation, I was talking to a Chinese girl in China a few years ago when I was backpacking through the country. And she told me that she was literally born in a barn beside whatever animals was in the barn as well. And that was how she was, and that was the norm at that time. And she was probably in her 30s then. And now she had a Ferrari, and her husband was a guy from Holland, and she was doing great. And it was fantastic to see how she went from 0 to 1 million in such a short time, and how it was so possible. And I think which will bring about the change in Asia is that when people are poor, they're happy to get the material items. But when they've all had the material items, then they want something more than that. And that's the spiritual element, or the sense that there's more to life. And as you say, I don't see it coming in 2025, but I could see it coming by 2050. And when I look at the sort of the self-destruction of Western values, and I look at the growth of Asia over the next 50 years, I think what I'm sensing is a shifting of energies. And sometimes I just have to observe it and see where it goes. I don't know, but it's interesting. Your point is, I don't disagree with anything you said there as well. They're not ready yet, but at the same time, we have over sort of complicated things at this side of the planet.
Well, it's very difficult when you're living and working in a system that is now obsolete, but the governing principles are all about permanency, and those people who fashion the principles, uphold the principles, and instrumentalize the principles are not willing to change when the rest of society is. So I hear you when you speak of the commercial material gain of China over the last 20 odd years. But having traveled through those major cities of Shanghai and Beijing, I don't actually see that the people are ready to awaken to a different cultural possibility, meaning that, you know, as I mingle with Chinese people, and indeed, you know, I was working through an interpreter, but a number of people came to me for consultation, and then I ran two very large workshops. What I realized was that cancer is a #1 killer in China, and that many people who have been dissolute and disenfranchised from any form of spiritual belief are now moving back to Buddhism, and particularly Tibetan Buddhism. But at the same time, the titular head of the Tibetan Buddhism is referred to as being a political fiend. So, I mean, there are just so, you know, in a country that's doing so well materially, it feels as though there are a number of major societal, emotional issues that still need to be dealt with. Whereas I see, you know, this is why I was giving the picture of what I'm perceiving. This is obviously only my perception.
I'm recording this podcast through Anchor. And if you're considering doing a podcast and you haven't heard about Anchor, then let me tell you, it's the easiest way to do a podcast. So let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute the podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. Definitely check it out. Download the app now from the store.
But I'm seeing the extraordinary shifts within a growth industry like mind, body, and spirit in the United States of America, where there are some very unique personalities that are highly intelligent and very articulate and completely interwoven with the healing of what the nation could be about. That over the next 10, 15 years, we're going to see an immense change within the entire countenance. And by that I mean materially and spiritually. Things in the United States of America move really fast and much faster than Europe. And I feel that the generic reason for why this is so is what you were just speaking about earlier, which is that within the American peoples, there is always hope. And their hopefulness is guided by a wonderful, youthful aspiration for the curiosity of difference and the ability to adapt through change. That I don't see happening so much within the peoples of Europe.
No. Talking about energy chakra points in America, have you ever visited Mount Shasta?
I have, yes.
And?
Well, it's one of the most remarkable energy centers on the planet. And so I had some very extraordinary experiences while I was there. And indeed, its energy is very closely in correspondence with the totality of what my own spiritual beliefs are all about and what I feel is my spiritual experience as a spiritual being having a human experience. So, yeah, I mean, it was very, very potent to me. And the spiritual guide that has been with me for many, many years often appears on Mount Shasta, and that's a being known as Saint-Germain.
Wow. Yeah, I remember you talking about that, actually. We went last year on your recommendation. Mm-hmm. You told me years ago about Mount Shasta, and last year I fulfilled a promise I made to you. Must have been 10 years ago since I met you.
Wow.
And it was It was so powerful, actually. It was. I don't really get hair standing on the backs of my neck on chakra points in that sort of like to that intensity, and I
Yeah.
don't really create for it either. But there, it was so powerful, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and that leads me to the area which I write in my last book as being the most beautiful, amazing, outstanding part of the world. And I've been to 140 countries, but I can easily
Mm-hmm.
say that on a per kilometer, per mile basis, what I describe as Middle England is the most spectacular. And I'm talking about a sort of circle that runs from Shaftesbury to Salisbury to Glastonbury to Bristol, and all that encompasses that sort of circle. And I know that that's an area which is very close to your heart as well.
It is, but what an amazing statement to hear. I mean, you obviously feel a very personal connection with those counties and that particular golden triangle that you've just identified.
Well, I can tell you why. It's if we go to Australia, which is a continent, we might fly for 4 hours and we get to Uluru, which blows your mind. And we might fly for another 6 and we'll come to an amazing beach. And we might fly for another 4 and we might come to an amazing rock formation. But in that part of our planet, you drive around a corner and there's a Uffington horse, which is X thousand years old, and then there's another 12 of them dotted across the countryside, which you come across sporadically. There's the Cern giant with his club in his hand and his whatever 12-meter penis. There's people rolling a cheese down a hill and running after it, even though it's steeper than a ladder. There's so much magic on a basically per kilometer basis, not on a per hour basis or per 100-kilometer basis. It's so condensed and it's so magical and powerful that it's incomparable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're really talking about the fact that the ancient life of the British Isles is very apparent in those areas. Isn't that interesting? And of course, we know that there are two very, very powerful ley lines that course through the area that you're describing, which for our listeners' sake is called the southwest of England. And so we're really comprising counties such as Cornwall, Devon, Somerset, Wiltshire, and Berkshire. And these two very powerful ley lines move from the tip of the Cornish point there, which is called Marizon, and going all the way through to Glastonbury, where they make love, onto Aberyhenge, where they make love, which is in Wiltshire, and then off into the northeast part of the United Kingdom, eventually through Bury St Edmunds and off into the Wash. So, it seems that most of the sites that you've just referred to are decorated, as it were, or geographically located around that area. And it's interesting, just this morning, I was sent the third crop circle that has taken place not far from Aberyhenge, which is just the other side of Marlborough in Wiltshire. And this is, in other words, this is a site for some of the most outstanding crop circle phenomenon in the entire world, which, of course, there's a great deal of controversy over in terms of its definition. I personally feel that it is extraterrestrially inspired, and the unique geometries that are formulated, I feel, through ultrasound are really unique. So if you can later just go on to our wonderful internet and check out the recent crop circles around Aberyhenge.
Or even better, if you can follow the beautiful and amazing Stewart Pearce on Facebook or any of his social media, which I will put in the comments. He really is a source of inspiration. And I have seen the last two crop circles basically from being friends with you on Facebook. And the last one was so unique to any crop circle I had ever seen. And the footage was phenomenal because it was a drone, which was literally going really close and very creatively around a carving, you could almost say, which was coronavirus related.
Yes.
And I have never seen one in such sort of asymmetrical shape. Usually there's some sort of symmetric to them, at least to my eye, but this one was its own unique one. It was unique to me. Maybe you've seen so many much more.
Well, no, because normally there's the level of symmetry that's used is very acute within the crop circles. And this one seemed to be rather like an organic splatter of a substance such as, I don't know, oil or maybe even your muesli breakfast, which has just been splattered in front of you. It was very unusual. And as I feel that there's a reason behind that, you know, that it was just that whomever created this was having a little bit of fun with us all, because the definition that we've just given to it was taking us in a very, very different direction from what we see as being the stereotypical crop circle.
Yeah.
And if you look very clearly, you'll see that there are 8 reference points. There are 8 tentacles. And on a scientific level, I think it's referring to the octaval influence of the way that we organize and structure our chemical systems. So 8 is the number in the first octave, you see. And when we go back into classical referencing, you'll see that there are 8 principal or 9 muses, and there were 8 high priests of the Judaistic who became extraordinary men in the Judaistic religion. There are many, many, many corollaries and corresponding features. So they were showing something very extraordinary that alerts the subatomic particles within our consciousness, and the information will be forthcoming as we move through these times of great change. So they're very, very extraordinary. For those people who are unaware, I would firmly recommend a visit through to Glastonbury in Somersetshire, which is referred to as being the heart chakra of the world. And that's steeped in ancient lore and history around Merlin and King Arthur and the great Isle of Avalon. So it's very palpable. As you were saying about Shasta, when we're there, it's not just simply a triggering of intellectual detail. There's something extraordinary taking place which awakens deep within us a feeling of the supernatural, a feeling of being very deeply moved. And it seems from what you were saying, a reminder of what your ancestral roots might have been in terms of your spiritual lineage.
Yes, it is. So even just people should just go just to have a look at the countryside and just to get away from social media and in the madness of our world. Whenever borders and things open up, it's just worth just going into the village and having a cup of tea, if nothing else. Do you agree, Stewart?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, it's a beautiful place to be in. You know, what you were describing, of course, were great effects or great impressions rather, that you've received from the Neolithic effects or the Neolithic sites that you were describing.
Yeah.
But, also, what is palpably obvious there is that it's beautiful, energetic landscaping. So one feels as though one's being informed by the undulating nature of the geography of this particular landscape, of these particular counties or areas of the British Isles. Yeah.
I was the last time I was there was not this autumn equinox, but the one just before. So whatever that was. Oh, it's nearly 2 years ago. Actually, we're coming up to 2 years. And I went there for the morning, the very early sunrise, and I met this lovely girl sitting there on the stones, just looking out. And I says, "Do you come here?" Anyway, I got talking to her. She says she comes in the mornings because she sees the giants going back through the mist. And I believed her because I knew she was telling me the truth, and I knew that she's seen the giants going back through the mist. And I sat there, and again, I never see anything, but that doesn't mean that they weren't there. And I was thinking, there's so much magic on this plane, depending on who you are and what vibration you're at and where you are on your progression as a spirit, as a soul, that if that place can awaken so much within a human.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It can be some of the major initiations in my life have taken place on Glastonbury Tor, which is it's a Celtic word for high hill.
Yeah.
That, you know, if we are of a spiritual we have spiritual proclivities or a spiritual persuasion, we can experience all sorts of extraordinary phenomenon that will feed our soul, feed our hearts, feed our spirit. But for those people who aren't necessarily, that it's still a very spectacular and very beautiful area of the planet to visit, just for, you know, the very reason that when we are with nature, we can actually imbibe or draw in the beauty of what nature affords us, because it always makes us feel nurtured, always makes us feel secure, always makes us feel more healthy. And so,
Indeed.
yeah, I mean, it's absolutely boundless.
Yes. I was, and talking about chakra points, I know that you go to Egypt, you take a group of people every year, you go on a retreat, and you have a certain amount of people that you will bring with you, and you will bring them. As I say, you're a guy who can transform human beings by being around them, and I'm talking about from the highest royals to the most humblest Irishman like myself, and your retreats to Egypt are something special, really something that impacts people at a really deep cellular level and a high spiritual level. Can you tell us a bit more about what you do when you're in Egypt, and if people want to go with you whenever things open up again, what's possible and how they can connect with you?
Well, thank you for leading into that beautifully. Yeah, the ancient form of Egypt has fascinated me for well over 50 years, from my first visit there when I was a young man. And the magic and the mystery, the allure of Egypt. And by that I mean really the middle area of Egypt along the body of the spine of the Nile, and southern Egypt. And so about 15 years ago, I thought it would be really fascinating to go back and spend an extended amount of time there and make contact with wisdom keepers that are native peoples, which I did. And I was fortuitously led to meet some very extraordinary people, particularly my guide, who's a very, very dear friend and a fine Egyptologist, but also a very sensitive, loving soul. And so I decided that I wanted to take people to Egypt so that they could feel the wonderment of what my love of Egypt is, particularly in relation to the ancient faith, or indeed the ancient rituals. And so I decided that, you know, going through some of the principal temples provides us with a perfect opportunity. And although these temples may be ruinous in the sense that some of their architecture has been partially destroyed, the point is that the energies that they're formulated by is still very much alive, because each of the significant temples are astrogeographical locations where there are a meeting of grids or fire lines, ley lines as we call them, in the soil, and also the temples tend to operate very much in relation to certain constellation or certain planetary features within the astrology or the astronomy of our planet. And so they're very powerful, as well as being created through sacred geometry. So when you step into them, anybody who has any sensitivity can feel an immense currency of energy going through. And what's also interesting is that they are based on the 7 basic chakra of the human body. And the chakra, for those people who aren't familiar, are wheels of energy that create a biocomputer or a database for the whole of the way that our energy functions, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So as you move through them, and thereby engaging in ritual, which is really allowing the intellect to identify certain forces, and then through ritual of taking all of those ideas deep into the soma of the body, into a level of embodiment, one can experience an extraordinary series of initiations, which for me finalizes in the 7th chamber, which is the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid on the Giza complex, which is a temple of vast initiation. And most of the rituals that I engage in are sonic rituals, where we chant certain mantras, certain chants, or certain prayers, certain affirmations. And people go through extraordinary experiences where they feel that they're releasing themselves from the trials and tribulations of their material existence in the West and moving into a much more incandescent or elevated, light-filled possibility within their bodies for living the truth of what the purest virtues of the human experience are, which is, love, 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 and joy, 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 and compassion and empathy and mercy and grace, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I go twice a year. I go around March, April. I mean, this year I was there in March, just before COVID hit. And in fact, we had to be evacuated from the country before the doors closed. And I normally go late March, early April, excuse me, and also just before Christmas in December. So if anybody hears this and thinks, wow, I'd love to do that, let's go on a spiritual odyssey with an unusual Englishman, then do. Just email me. Stewart at stewartpearce.com is the generic email.
Perfect. That's what people exactly need to hear, Mr. Pearce. And I suppose that's a good enough way to round things up. If you're listening to this and you get a sense that there's more that you could do, or you're looking for a way to take an elevated path, then it's no coincidence that this is the podcast that you have tuned into. You have listened to this because you were supposed to listen to this, because it was meant to cross your path at this time, whether it's the year 2022 or the year 2032. And Stewart Pearce is a wonderful, kind, fantastic English gentleman, as he has said, and he has contributed so much to the success in my life that he doesn't even know. And I can tell you that before I do anything important, I will chant along with Pearce, because true story. First time I met Stewart, I bought a book from him, and without glancing up for more than a second, he goes, "You need this as well," and he gave me one of his CDs for free. I went straight home, put it through my computer, and uploaded it onto my iPod, and that has been played thousands of times, that CD.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And before I do any podcast, I will chant from my heart, as you taught me. Before I go to any big meeting or any big launch or any big event, I will want to make sure that I am communicating from my heart. And therefore, that's the only type of... People always wonder how much preparation I put in. My preparation is with Stewart Pearce. I chant from my heart, and I trust that everything else will come through me as it is supposed to, as a result. So I'm talking to the guy. He's just after giving you his email address. I'm going to put it in the comments of this. So wherever you listen to it, Apple, Spotify, wherever, please reach out to this guy. Follow him on Facebook. Sign up for his newsletter. Get him on Instagram. He's there, and this guy is... I can't speak highly enough of him. I'm honoured when I sit down for dinner with him in London. I'm honoured when I'm on the same soil as him in Egypt, and I'm honoured when I can share a cup of tea with him in Dublin. And hopefully he will come to our new home soon and relax there with us again in Sweden.
Well, Patrick, that is one of the most beautiful tributes. Thank you so much. I'm deeply touched. Little did I know how much effect I've had on your life, so thank you. Thank you, thank you. And I feel that the book that you were talking about was The Alchemy of Voice, isn't it?
It was indeed.
Which interestingly, at this time of subtle quietness, I mean, I'm really, really busy with a lot of clients online, but I'm recording the audio book of The Alchemy of Voice. I'm almost finished. So in a week or two, it should be available for very easy purchase through Audible or directly through my site. My website, that is. And so, if anybody's intrigued, just come straight to me via Stewart, Stewart, at Stewart Pearce, Pearce.com. And if you go onto Google, you'll see, just type in my name and you'll see a lot of referencing to me. So thank you so much for that. And it's been wonderful spending a short period of time with you in discussion of all of these extraordinary things that are taking place in in our world at this time of vast change. And may everybody who's listening in be at peace and find serenity and tranquility in their lives so that they are able to optimize their creativity full of love and joy and begin to live the greatest vision of who they are.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well,
So,
namaste,
bless
Mr.
you,
Stewart
Patrick.
Pearce.
Adios.
I love you, and I shall see you soon, hopefully.
Bless you. Much love to you.